Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Welcome to my next podcast. I am Wanda Curley, and I am your authority on project, program, and portfolio management. This podcast is brought to you by PM Powered, a consulting company in project, program, and portfolio management to meet your needs. So if you have any requirements out there, make sure to contact me at wanda@pmpowered.com. So I am in sunny Florida, Orlando, Florida, and no, I'm not here on vacation. I am here for a conference, and I'm going to be talking about my model, which incorporates neuroscience into the business world. So I thought I'd speak to you about neuroscience today and how we can bring it into the project management arena. So we as project managers, program managers, and portfolio managers need to think about our brains and the health. Missing a great big opportunity for our teams to be creative and be strategical thinking and be innovative. So we have to make sure that our ability to function is understood about our brains. So let me tell you a little bit about what the Brain Performance Institute says about brain health. It says a good functioning brain includes making wise decisions, solving problems, interacting successfully with others, enjoying an emotional balance. All of these functions demand the capacity to remember, comprehend, and learn, to process information, events, and people, and to think strategically and to be innovative in solving problems. But how do we do this? We have to make sure that our brain is functioning properly, but it's a muscle just like other things in our body. And to keep it going, we have to exercise it. But we also have to make sure that our body is in good standing. So what are some of the things that we need to do? Well, the brain is not a static organ, as I've just mentioned. And what else does the Brain Performance Institute says? It says it changes continually in line with how we use it to think, interact, learn, feel, and imagine. Can you imagine all of these things in our brains going on? And we've got to be able to harness that to become creative and innovative. Our habits such as physical exercise, nutrition, sleep, and stress management contribute to or detract from the brain's function. Training and lifestyle habits can maintain and even strengthen brain health by keeping the brain's complex circuits highly synchronized with a healthy blood supply. Better brain health means better brain performance. So we have to keep our brains agile and thinking and keep that circuitry going. We used to think that all the brain circuitry ended when you were about 25 to 30 years old. But now brain circuitry, we know, is changing every day of your life. And the more it changes, the more plastic it becomes, and that's better for you. So what else does we know about the brain? So the next thing I want to talk about is give your attendees' brains a break, not a workout. So I am at a conference, and it's just chock full of all kinds of tracks of different things you can think of, and that is stressful. I'm trying to think about what they're trying to exactly impart at this conference. Yes, they have a theme, but I look at the different things that they're offering, and I'm thinking, how does this relate to the theme? So one of the things that they talk about in this is offering a package program schedule, and we see tracks upon tracks, and they're saying that is really not a good thing for our brains because it's stressful for our brains. And what did I just say that the Brain Performance Institute said? Let's not stress out our brains. And if we come to a conference and we're stressed out trying to figure out which track we want to go to, or, oh my goodness, if I go to this track, I'm going to miss this and this track, and I really want to see that. They recommend, and this in this by Betsy Bear, it recommends that we don't have so many tracks at conferences, that you have less, because that helps our brains perform better. So Dee O'Neill, who was part of the person that talked about this, she recommends that that those of cognitive functions we want to spark at our conference, it is our brain CEO or understands chemistry. You can learn what drives it, drains it. So there are the other three things that drain your brain: feeling unproductive, deep thought deprived, and cruising on autopilot. And how many times have you seen yourself going to a conference and you're just cruising on autopilot? You go, oh, I go here, and then I go here next, I go here. Oh, now it's time for lunch. Oh, what do I do after? But it's helpful too, if you're going on autopilot and you're not doing any deep thinking, you go into one of the talks and you can't comprehend what's really going on at a deep level. So the cause of overload is stress. And what did I just say? If there's too many tracks, it's very stressful for us. We tend to over-select information so we can filter better. So often simple is better. So if you can just maybe come to the conference already knowing what you're going to do and don't worry that you're missing other things. Stressful. Looking at your phone. Do you know that you look at your phone over 150 times a day? And that is a distraction, which means your brain is not optimized and it leads to deep thought deprivation. The brain is not built to multitask. That can't make it do multitasking. And we do that a lot on project management. So I said I was going to bring this into project management. Think about how we multitask on project management. We might be on 2 or 3 projects at a time and having to jump from one to the other. That is absolutely not the best way to get projects done. The best way to get projects done is to assign a person to one task on one project and have them get that task done. Then have them go to the next project or do the next task on the project that they're already on. But to have a person multitask from project to project is unproductive. They can't get into the deep thinking. They're not creative and they're not innovative. So help your project management teams and program management teams and portfolio teams be productive by not making them multitask constantly. Think about this person is, and that is not productive. Yes, we as parents tend to be are multitasking, but you find you are constantly tired, you're stressed out, and your brain can't do deep thinking. And that's one of the reasons why, is because your brain is on multitask all the time. So what are the other ways of making your event more productive? Well, one of the things is to tell stories. Tell stories in your catalogs about the event. So if you're looking at what's going on that day, have a story in there. Your people are going to remember the conference better if you have stories. I try to start every one of my seminars or my conferences when I'm presenting with a story, because this helps the people focus and become better understanding of what you have to say, and they remember it because they remember the story. So what are some other things that she talks about? Your keynote should be somebody that really believes and understands the attendees, because excuse me, it's dry in this room. If the keynote isn't somebody that can relate to the audience because they're in something completely different, which is all right, but they've got to relate it back to what your audience. So make sure that you select the keynote well, and that it's somebody that understands the audience. So let me read you the final paragraph that they had. All it takes is 5 minutes to prioritize. This is the problem. You must develop empathy. If you have empathy, even for the adversary, you have trust of the audience, Gothari said. They have to be the one who solves the problem in particular. Your closing presenters need to nail leading them to the best new version of themselves moving forward. So as we look at events, I wonder about all these events. I don't go to many events. I go to 2 or 3 because I do get stressed out by them, because I think there's so much there And sometimes I just don't go to the event, even though I'm there. I go back up to my room because I'm stressed out about what's going on there. So again, I think if we had storytelling as part of it, even if it's just past attendees telling the story about how great the conference was, I think you'd have a better conference people. And have 2 or 3 themes and stick to those themes. And people will appreciate that for you and don't have as many tracks. So let's go to the next one. This one is our reading brain. So it says, as humans embraced literacy about 6,000 years ago, it's changed a circuit in our brains. The circuit evolved from decoding basic information like the number of goats in our herds, she said, to our present and highly elaborate reading brains. But our reading brains haven't adapted to digital yet. Our reading brains have adapted to printed materials, and we tend to even look at printed materials in more detail. On a digital pad, we tend to not focus. We tend to read quickly. We tend to skip over it. And when I was reading this, doing that, and I had to go back and reread the article because it was on the digital medium. And then I switched over to paper because I had to read something for that. And yes, I was multitasking, which I shouldn't have been doing. But I found myself, yes, I did concentrate more on the paper because our brains are wired for that. What does that mean for us? Does it mean that our brains will be recircuited in the future for digital? I have a feeling it will be because I see paper going out the window. As I know that my children already look at digital more, and I can imagine that my grandchildren won't even know what paper or a book is unless it's in an online medium. But our brains right now are not wired for digital, at least my and those of my generation. However, as things change, I think we'll see our brains rewiring for the digital. Will it take 1 or 2 years? No, I think this is something that's going to change over 50 to 100 years before our brains actually get rewired. I might be wrong. It might happen quicker. But think about our brains and how they had to rewire itself 6,000 years ago because of printed materials. And now printed materials have rewired our brains for good. But let's hope that the digital environment doesn't cause us to not look at what we're reading, but causes us to understand it. So how does that relate to us in an event or with our learning or with projects? Well, think about projects. We're doing everything on a laptop or a tablet. And I just said that we tend to not look at everything in detail when it's on a medium like a computer or a laptop when it's digitized. So how much are we missing when we are on a project because we're not looking at all the material that's in front of us because we're scanning it, we're skipping paragraphs, or we're just reading a couple of sentences within the paragraphs? We might be missing some very crucial information on that project. So make sure that you understand that when you're reading on a digitized medium, you need to really focus and read it, not skip it, and go back and reread if you need to. And encourage your teams to do that as well, because our brains are not wired for digital communications at this point. But it will come. I have no doubts in my mind that it'll come. So what are some brain-friendly meetings that we can have? Because we have all kinds of meetings in project management and program management. So the brain likes information in chunks, and I tend to do that when I'm speaking to have 10-minute chunks. And it's better to give a 6 to 10-minute talk than a 1-hour lecture. So if you're going to go to a meeting, have things in chunks of 6 to 10 minutes and take a break in between. Just say, okay, let's to get a drink of water, let's stand up, do whatever. But do it in 6 to 10 minutes or you're going to lose your audience. And I've said that before in previous podcasts. Emotional arousal helps the brain learn. So Medina adds an emotional hook to every 10-minute section during his talks. That means telling a story, doing something different, doing something odd so people remember you in your 10-minute chunks. It doesn't mean to be a clown. It doesn't mean telling an inappropriate joke. It just means capture your audience through some type of hook. And usually storytelling is the best. And storytelling doesn't have to be long. It can be a quick 3 to 5 sentence story that captures the people, and it has to relate to what you're talking about. Physical exercise boosts brain power. The best business meeting would have everybody walking at about 1.8 miles per hour. Can you imagine walking during a meeting? That would be exciting to me. I can't wait until I have a desk. I already stand up at my desk, and I love doing that, but I would love to have a treadmill, and I've seen where some people actually do have that, have a treadmill in front of their desk, and I think that would be great because our physical exercise boosts the brain power because it increases the blood flow to the brain. And when we have more blood flow to the brain, we can do deeper thinking. So I think that would be exciting to have people walking around in meetings. It might be distracting because it looks like you're multitasking, but in this case, it's not really multitasking. Sleep loss. No, I'm not advocating that people should sleep during the meeting, but you need to make sure that people are getting rest. Don't make people work hours upon hours of overtime, because then they become, and we know that, they become sloppy, they do stupid mistakes. And Medina says, for that reason, Medina's clients who once worked late into the night now knock off early enough that there is time to exercise and sleep. And exercise can be as going out for a walk and enjoying what's around you. And make sure you get good sleep. Exercise helps sleep. Brains need breaks. I can't emphasize that enough. Your brain needs. The most common communication mistake is relying too much information without spending enough time to connect the dots. So connect the dots for your audience. Don't just give them information, but tell them how they can relate all that information and what's in it for me, so to speak. And finally, he says, images communicate more effectively than words. How many times have you gone to a presentation, and I've already seen it at this conference, where there are too many words on the PowerPoint? A typical PowerPoint presentation has nearly 40 words per slide. That's too many. Professionals everywhere need to know about the incredible efficiency of text-based information and the incredible effect of images. Images are what does it, and that's what I do with my presentations. I tend to have more images than anything else. So let's switch to another one. So what I'm going to talk about is, what would it mean for AI to become conscious? Well, I don't think AI is going to become conscious anytime in the near future, and in fact, this article, which is by Singularity Hub, says the same thing. But it talks about deep learning, and it talks about there's two camps in the world about AI. There are those that fear it, and there are those that embrace it. I think I tend to be one of those that embrace it because I think it's great that we have that. But what are we going to do about AI? AI needs to be transparent, and I mentioned that in previous podcasts, that it needs to be transparent. But it has a lot to do with, we've even hooked up brains to AI to see if we can bring in different harnesses of the brain. So if we could map a neuron, what happens if in the future we can take, if we have a broken neuron in our brain and can put a circuit chip, how many circuit chips does it take before we're not considered a human brain anymore? Well, that's way, way into the future, but I think it's coming. However, we have those that want to talk about AI, and we need to, as I mentioned, we need to be transparent with the AI, but we need to also be able to understand that AI can provide a lot of things for us. Medicine is a prime example, and there already is an AI that could save lives, but they're not being used because they're not trusted by the nurses and the doctors. They're scared of it. They're afraid that it's going to take over their jobs, and AI shouldn't and should not do that. It should be something that helps doctors and nurses, but they're afraid of it because they don't understand it. So we need to have enough transparency to make these individuals comfortable with the technology, but not make it so transparent that it stops advancing the technology. If doctors and nurses want to know how it's coded and how it's done and how it reasons, then I think we're asking too much. Think about a self-driving car. People don't want to do a self-driving car until we have zero chance of an accident, but that's ridiculous. I know everybody's thinking, well, why is it ridiculous? Well, think about humans that drive every day. There's thousands of deadly crashes every day caused by people driving cars, but yet we're terrified of a self-driving car. Think about a 16-year-old that you give them their driver's license and we don't even know what's going on in their brains. 16-year-olds don't even know what's going on in their brains. Their brains are still forming and they're still doing all this circuitry and they do stupid things, yet we give them this deadly machine to go out and drive, but yet we won't embrace self-driving cars. Yes, I think we have to have more transparency around it. We need to understand how the self-driving car mechanisms, but we can't go deep that it becomes so transparent that we're overwhelmed with the technology. So this brings us back to the fact that in building tech modeled after the human brain, which has evolved over millions of years, we're working towards an end whose means we don't fully comprehend. But it's something as basic as choosing when to brake or accelerate, or something as complex as measuring consciousness. And what is consciousness? While that used to be for social scientists, we now can do it with our with quantitative stuff, because we can look into the brain now with functional MRIs and PET scans. So we're starting to understand consciousness. Will we put that in AI? Will the AI say this will happen in the future based on AI? Possibly, but we'll need to harness that information differently, and we need to use it as an adjunct to our thinking, not as a replacement for our thinking. So I'm Wanda Curley, your authority on project, program, and portfolio management. I want to thank you for coming to my podcast today, which was brought to you by PM Powered, your company that brings you project, program, and portfolio management. If you have any consulting needs, again, contact me at wanda@pmpowered.com. Please follow me on PM Current. There you can connect with me on LinkedIn, YouTube, Facebook, and Twitter. I'd love to have you following me, because it's a great blessing to have each of you following me and listening to me. Hear from you. If you have something to say on anything that I've talked about, I'd love to hear from you. Please contact me at wanda@pmpowered.com. And we can have a discussion about what you think about this. Or if you're a project manager in any of the areas that I'm talking about, especially neuroscience or AI, I'd love to have you on this podcast. Contact me at wanda@pmpowered.com. It was great to talk to you today. I look forward to seeing you next Monday, and have a blessed week.